All right, so I'm Ron. Been here a little over 20 years, so I've seen a lot of change in Big Sky in my time here. I'm going to talk about a few things. I'm going to start with what we are as a county water and sewer district, talk about our service area, talk a little bit about SFEs, which is an acronym for single family equivalents. Then I'm going to get into the treatment and disposal we have going on here without trying to get too detailed on the technical merits of that. And then I've got a list of resources that I've already put on our website for anybody that wants more information on any of these topics. So we'll start with the governance. We're a county water and sewer district, which is a special purpose unit of government. There's provisions in the Montana statutes that we operate under. And under MCA, we're Title 7, Chapter 13, Part 22 and 3. You can go in the laws and look at all the things county water and sewer districts are authorized to do. And we've got a few kind of key things that I'll just highlight real briefly. Our district was created in 1993 after a public vote. So you don't just create a district with a resolution. It has to be a public process. It replaced the Rural Improvement District 305, which had run in Big Sky for 20 years or so. But as an RID, they didn't have a lot of authority to do things, bonding and taxing authority, tools they needed to really deal with the problems Big Sky was facing. So a water and sewer district was created in '93. We have an elected board. 5 of our board members are elected and 2 are appointed, 1 by each county, because our district straddles Madison and Gallatin County. So we're a little different. Most water and sewer districts around the state have 5 board members. We have 7. We set our own rates because we're a public entity. We don't go through the Public Service Commission. We do that at the local level with our board. We do have to do public hearings for rate setting, so it is a public process. We also have taxing and bonding authority. In my years here, we have bonded a little over $28 million for various projects, both water and sewer projects. All general obligation bonds that we've done in Big Sky. And one big power we also have is eminent domain. We've never used it. We don't plan to use it, but it's a tool if a county water and sewer district had to use it. We've got really 4 service areas in our district. The Mountain Village, I think everybody's familiar with what that is. The Meadow Village, which is what we are here. Hidden Village, Aspen Groves would be included in that. Lone Moose Meadows, which is kind of mid-mountain. And then Spanish Peaks is also in our district. So this is a map view showing our district boundary in red and the different areas highlighted in different colors. We're 4 miles tall and about 7.5 miles deep. These are some of our neighbors, and I think I got these boundaries off a little bit, but Moonlight Basin actually sits over in the other watershed over the divide. It's our neighbor to the west, the Yellowstone Club up here, Spanish Peak south. Then the canyon, I don't have any boundaries around it, but it's outside our district. Our district's this little area right here. This is an overview of our water system, and I'm not going to talk too much about water, but again, our boundaries there. The blue cylinders are our water tanks. These little red things are fire hydrants. The blue lines are our water lines that service the mountain. Years ago, we used to have 3 separate independent water systems. The mountain was separate, Aspen Groves and the Meadow were separate. In 2006, we did a bond, borrowed money, and built a pipeline to connect the Mountain Village down to the Meadow. So we effectively have one big public water system. There's one footnote with this, Spanish Peaks. They're in our water and sewer district boundary. They're connected to the sewer system, but they have their own water system, and they're running that independent of us. I showed their water tank right here, but that's theirs to own, operate, and maintain. These are our public wells, these black little points. Our main water production's on the mountain near Lake Levinsky. The geology up there, I don't know if Richter's in the house, but the geology up there is totally different than what we have in the meadow here. So we've got 5 wells in the meadow, 2 we brought online this summer, and this is our bread and butter for water production in the meadow. We have the ability now to feed water off the mountain to the meadow, and some irrigation demand is 10 times what our winter demands are for drinking water here. So we do divert some water off the mountain. This table here just shows our overall water production capacity capabilities with the current wells we've got, and we've got 14 of them. This is our sewer system. This is Upper Cascade. All these little green points are manholes, and they're all connected with sewer pipelines. There's a line that runs down what we call the poop chute road down into Aspen Groves, and our treatment plant sits way down in the end. One of the beautiful things about Big Sky with all this elevation is we have no lift stations. If you go around the city of Bozeman, they got lift stations everywhere, and they're a big maintenance headache, and we're fortunate here we don't have any. You can see we've got green here in Spanish Peaks. That's all the sewer that's been constructed there that is in our district. We have taken those over. We own and operate the sewer up there. Moonlight Basin's got its own treatment plant, their own operators. They run their own gear up there. Same thing with the Yellowstone Club. They're in the process of actually starting up a brand new SBR treatment plant, and I'll show you what ours looks like in a little bit here. So our district service area, we've got about 2,600 customers. We look at customers as billable accounts. We estimate that we're about 45% billed out. And depending on who you talk to, that number varies on what we think our build out is and at what time of the year you think you're counting your build out, because we get so many people here with tourist impact to Big Sky. This is a breakdown of our customer base. You can see we're dominated by residential, 3,800 residential type of connections. We've still got a lot of undeveloped lots on our books. And then what's interesting here is we've got a lot more condominiums than we've got single family homes, which I think makes us unique from most communities. You know, Belgrade, Bozeman, they all have single family homes, some multifamily stuff, but not that much. So SFEs, if you come to our board meetings, you hear us talking about these things a lot. It's a basis for which we issue permits when you're connecting a new home or a condo or a commercial project. We look at the square footage that's in there. From that, we know how many gallons per day per SFE we average over the years. So it gives us a benchmark to look at our growth over time. And it also is a funding mechanism because we charge for those SFEs when you permit. So it costs X dollars when you connect water and sewer, and the multiplier are the single family equivalents that's in that permit application. This is the table on how we determine what the SFEs are for single family and condo projects. So if you're coming to us with a condo, we look at how many square feet the condo unit's going to have, then we multiply by 0.85 and get a single family equivalent value for each unit that's in that structure. And then a water meter is required for every condo unit, every home. When I started here, there were no water meters in Big Sky. And we got those done starting in 01, finished 03. And that became the basis for billing, and it is a real effective tool to manage irrigation demand as well. For commercial projects, it's a similar table where you look at various uses, square footages for commercial spaces. It's not an exhaustive list. It's not a perfect list. You know, every now and then we get a call from a developer. We want to drop a car wash into our district. I have no idea how many SFEs a car wash is, so we've got to get an engineer to look at, well, what kind of water demand does a car wash create, to even figure out how to permit things like that. Another example would be the hospital. We don't build hospitals around here. So when that dropped in, that was a little exercise to figure out how many SFEs would be connecting to our sewer system. So this gives us a basis for tracking these SFEs permitted over time. Taylor, you'll see this every year at the BSOA annual meeting. Actually, I look forward to that every year, Taylor. But so we look at the SFEs that have been permitted over time, going back to 1990 is as far back as I have data for. And then this is 2016 over here. So you can see this is a pretty healthy, steep curve of activity. When I started here 20 years ago, we were sitting just a little bit below 2,000 single-family equivalents. One thing to note, back when I started here, we used to count bedrooms and bathrooms to figure SFEs. We changed that in 2008, which would be right about here. And we made it square footage instead, which I think is a fair way to do it. So I think it probably impacted our curve and flattened it a little bit. And you see that reflected in the data right here. We flattened out a little. Plus, we had a recession immediately after that, which didn't help. This is the by year how many SFEs have been permitted. And you can see the big dip here is the recession. There's very little permitting, especially for new construction. We were doing some remodel permitting, small stuff. And then as we come out of the recession, here we go. And we've got a record year going on right now. That does include the lodge project in Spanish Peaks that some of you may have heard about. It's a very large project. It's been permitted. They aren't even construction yet, but it's in our books, so it's reflected here. This is just a table that breaks down the growth that we've seen in connection permits and SFEs over time. And the takeaway from this is the average since 1996. And 1996 is a big deal for us in Big Sky because from 93 to 96, you could not build a home here. DEQ, no offense, Todd, you put the hammer on Big Sky. Put a moratorium in place you couldn't build. So we had 3 years where you couldn't build a structure. And then we got the moratorium lifted in July of 96, and we took off. You know, so there was some pent up construction demand there. So since 96, we've averaged about 5% growth in single family equivalents.
Technically, it wasn't you couldn't build, you couldn't hook up.
That's a pretty big point. Yeah. No, in fairness, yes, that's correct. That's correct. But if you were hooking to our gear, you could not.
Right.
But there's a lot of development around us that isn't connected to us.
Right.
So now we're going to look at our wastewater situation a little closer, wastewater capacity. So when you look at wastewater systems as a whole, you look at capacity in kind of 3 buckets. Treatment, what your plant can handle. Storage, in our case, because we're storing it. Most plants don't do that. And then disposal capacity. What do you do with the treated water once it's gone through your treatment process? We've got an SBR. It's an acronym for sequencing batch reactor. It's an activated mechanical plant. It does very well with big swings in flow. And that's one of the reasons we chose that technology, because we get big swings in flow, as we'll see when I show some of the graphs I've got. With our winter population and skier visits, we see big, big numbers. I got 5 minutes left. Are you kidding me?
No. You can have my 10.
I'm going over a little bit. So this is a breakdown. Only if they want me to. If they want me to sit down, I'll sit. So this is a breakdown. I went from November of 14 to through January. So this is an annualized flow coming into our treatment plant. You can see our big numbers are January. Our biggest day of the year is December 31st, just like clockwork with the skier traffic we get. And we saw it 2 years in a row. We get this big, big spike. Our average flow right now is about 390, 390,000 gallons per day. We'll spike up to almost 700,000 gallons a day on that weekend alone. It's crazy. This is this is a busy table, but we're 14% ahead of last year when you look at year to date through October 2015 to 2016. So we're seeing some scary numbers coming at us. Annual wastewater flow over time, projecting out, I figure we're going to be close to 140 million gallons for the year. To give you some scale on these things, City of Bozeman in their last quarterly report discharged almost 500 million gallons in 3 months. So their average day flow is 5 million a day. Ours is a little less than 400,000. Oh, treatment plant. This is a shot of our treatment plant, which sits down here next to the park. This is up the side of the hill. Headworks, these are the different building components. So I'm going to explain the process a little bit because it is complicated here. This is an aerial shot of our plant up here and the sewer that comes in next to our storage ponds. Sewage flows into the plant through the Headworks building. These are screens, are the initial screening that happened, and I promised I wouldn't take pictures too close of this stuff. So this takes out the big stuff, and then we got grit removal over here to take out sand and the fine stuff. From there, it goes to our SPR. We got 2 very large concrete basins. The wastewater goes in there, and you just pour air to it. Keep your biology going, you shut it off, it settles, and then you decant off the top. So it's just this cycling process all the time. Then it's returned up to these storage ponds once it leaves the plant. And then we have a small pump house where we can pump from there up to the filter building, which is this building right next to us. That's got sand filters in it, 3 trains. So we actually have tertiary treatment here. Everything's spread apart, but we do have tertiary treatment. It leaves this building, goes into the irrigation pond. From there, it goes to the large pond, where we hold that water through the winter. So there, you look there now, they're all drawn down. We'll fill them up this winter to repeat the cycle. We have big pumps in the basement of this building right here that allow us to pump water in big volumes to the golf course, where it gets spray irrigated during the summer months. We start irrigating about May 1 and we shut down in October. We also have the ability to take water from the large storage pond to this pump house below us. I like pumps, I guess. I gotta get pumps in all my pictures. So this allows us to pump water all the way up to the Yellowstone Club Pond. Red line's our district boundary. Green line is this force main pipe. We call it a force main because it's pumped. It's under pressure. It's not a gravity line. It's pumped 7.2 miles up to the club. This blue thing here, Spanish Peaks is working on a new pond that'll be lined, that we'll be able to put a pipeline to add capacity for storage, and they're going to add their golf course to the system. So we're looking forward to having that. We got a second pump station because there's so much elevation. We have to have a second station to get water all the way to the top, and then it goes up to the club's storage pond, which is a little over 80 million gallons. This is YC's golf course here, so this water then gets used for irrigation on the YC course. The elevation is pretty tremendous. The base of the pump station up here is 61. We got 2,000 feet of vertical elevation to get up to the top of the club. It was a $2.5 million project. Our storage, this is the way it looked in 1995. And this was constructed back in the 70s when Big Sky built this. We expanded the storage. I got 2 minutes. I'm not even going to get to the good stuff. I got 2 minutes to tell you a lot. But so this is what the ponds look like now. In '96, as part of the project to get the moratorium lifted, the intermaction work plan, we went in and relined and excavated bigger ponds to effectively expand our storage. So we've got quite a bit more storage in place now than we did back in '95. So that's the yellow are the outlines of the old storage ponds. The green are what we've got today. As a sidebar, we compost 100% of our sludge that comes from the plant. It gets sold at $25 a yard, and we really don't have any trouble getting people to buy it. And we don't advertise in the valley because we're getting rid of it up here for no problem. So irrigation disposal, where we hang our hat for all this. This is the Meadow Village area and the Meadow Village golf course that Big Sky owns and runs. This is a map view that kind of shows where these holes are. So right now, and for years, 100% of what we took in would go to these golf courses. And then we built the YC line in 2002, finished in 2004. So that's also available to us for irrigation. And engineers do their best to come up with estimates on how much irrigation can go to any of these courses, and it's really a range of numbers depending on a lot of variables. The biggest one is rainfall. So the engineer looks at your soils and designs around the wettest year in 10. They look at your elevation, how many irrigation days you're going to get in. We're different here. We have more here than the club or the course at Moonlight or the course at the Yellowstone Club. So they give you their best guesstimate as far as how much water we can put on the course. So in our facility plan that was done in '98, finalized in 2000, the engineers said, well, based on those parameters, looks like you've got 137 days of irrigation available, 143 million gallons. That was just to this Meadow golf course. But it's also wrapped around the wettest year in 10. So what do you do with the wettest year in 50? You're going to be over irrigating. So you got to have other places to go with this stuff. So what's the problem? Treatment, I got 1 minute. Treatment, disposal, storage. Our biggest issue here is disposal. We can treat it, we can expand the treatment plant, we can, storage is complicated, but you could build more storage. It's always, what are you going to do with the water after it's gone through this treatment process? Another little sidebar, we actually had a discharge permit. It was issued in April 1 of 1999. Todd remembers this. He was at the hearing with me in '98 at the courthouse in Bozeman. That was issued. We never used it. We never built the pipe. A lot of people in Bozeman thought we were discharging to the river, all this stuff. But the permit that was issued then said you can only discharge during peak runoff, March, April, May, June. That added up to 15 million gallons a year, which we let that permit lapse in about 2008. I think we held it for 10 years because, and now if we were to ever apply for another one, it's a whole new process. So this gets back to the question, what's the problem? Our engineers are projecting, we've updated all these studies. The resort areas around us are doing studies. How much is the top end of all this wastewater need going to be? Trying to get our arms around it. So the engineers have projected that under different growth scenarios, we're going to need to figure out more options to manage this wastewater problem over time. And again, it's a continuum. Depending on what growth rate you pick, what your full build out. Occupancy is huge here. If we were 100% occupancy year round, we'd already be out of capacity, but we're not. We have a low occupancy rate, and that varies as you go across. Yellowstone Club's different than the Meadow folks here. Moonlight's different than YC, so very difficult things to get your arms wrapped around. So this just drives the point home a little bit. When you look at all these studies, looking at the Meadow course, the Yellowstone Club course, and Spanish Peaks course factored into that, how much can we manage to get rid of each year? Engineers estimating we're going to be short by about 119 million gallons. That's in a dry year. In a wet year, the gap gets wider because you're not going to be able to irrigate as much. So they're giving an estimate there of 155 million. So what are our options? Quite a few. Expand irrigation, groundwater discharge, that requires a discharge permit. That could be engineered drain fields, that could be drilled wells, kind of like what they do in the oil patch. Snowmaking, we look at snowmaking a lot. Mike's going to talk about it in a little bit. Snowmaking would require surface discharge permit because if the snow is going to melt, run off into a stream, it's going to need a surface discharge permit. Stream surface discharge permit. Small decentralized treatments. I'm not a big proponent of seeing treatment plants scattered all over Big Sky, but that could be an option where instead of having one big central facility, you start putting all these little packaged treatment plants all around Big Sky. Combinations, all of the above, and I guess one of the objectives of this group is maybe there's others out there that we haven't really looked at. So that's part of this process that we're in. Resources, these are all the studies that have been done back to 90. These are all online. So when people tell me you need to study it more, I'm thinking, no, you need to read the studies we've done because this issue's been looked at a lot. But all of these are on our website as PDFs available for download if anybody wants to.
And Ron has clustered them at the top, and we've got a link on our project site page to all of the reports he thinks are most essential for this.
Yeah, it's great reading stuff.
So between now and
So I'll be happy to answer questions when we do our larger group. So I'm done.
you are so
I don't know how far out there.